Thank you very much, Officer. Good afternoon. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar, Chair of Public Works. This is a committee of one, and we are expecting Councilmember Alarcon any minute, but we thought we'd get started. So with that, if we could go to item number one.
Item number one, continued from January 6, 2010 and April 21st, 2010. Motion, Huizar Han, relative to the development of a draft payment installment plan for nonprofit sponsors of special events to allow for maximum flexibility for full payment of fees associated with city services for the events, and for city attorney to draft an ordinance to amend the special event subsidy policy to allow for payment of city costs on an installment plan. This item has also been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
All right, so I don't believe Budget and Finance has heard this, right? Has Budget and Finance heard this item? Not yet.
No, they'll hear it after.
They're waiting for it here. Okay. So is staff here available to report on this item, please?
I'll start. Hello, Councilmember Jan Zatorsky, representing the Office of Finance. I hope you received our report, which was issued yesterday.
No.
It basically talks about a little bit of the background.
Can I see it?
Do we have?
This report was received early this morning and was not able to make it on the agenda.
Okay. All right.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
So in response to the motion, this basically states that Finance did meet with representatives from Bureau of Street Services, and we discussed different methods of permitting in the process of installment agreements, and unfortunately it's a very manual process for both of our agencies, and under the current economic climate, we've both been hit with a lot of reductions, and so we had not recommended or actually made a recommendation that either of us take on the process, but that we do support the concept of an installment, a simplified installment plan.
Okay. So what you're saying is that we won't have a official procedure to do that, but I'm just reading through the lines. But if there is someone who wants an installment plan, they could talk to you, the departments, and work something out.
Paul Smith from the CLA. In actuality, we've had an opportunity to explore this way of doing this. As you know, the ordinance specifically says that the sponsor is to pay up front prior to the issuancing of the permit. However, we've seen that some of these events have had a fairly high cost associated with them, and that maybe the use of an installment plan is not entirely without some merit. We went to council with an actual contract for the Fiesta Broadway, which incorporated an installment plan there. In cooperation with the Board of Public Works, BOSS, and my office, we also have utilized on 2 occasions an agreement letter between the city and a sponsor for an installment plan or a plan that allowed for a deferral of the payment, all of which these have been paid. So we're warming up to the notion of perhaps modifying the ordinance to incorporate the ability, maybe on a case-by-case basis, to incorporate an installment plan. For instance, if we had a threshold, if city costs exceeded a certain amount, let's say it's $40,000, $35,000, $40,000, we could require them to, through a cooperation letter, an agreement letter, to put a down payment down and then pay on a certain payment plan for the full amount. Now, we do recognize that this is a more intense in terms of actually managing and administering the payment of the fees. But we do recognize that there are in some instances there may be opportunities where the installment plan may play an important role in actually delivering the special event to the community.
Okay.
So I think what we're asking that this matter be continued, have us to have further discussions, and with the Board of Public Works, the Commissioner Alarcon, to maybe lay out to lay out a plan that we bring back to you that we would then incorporate into the ordinance.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's continue this 45 days, 60 days?
Yeah, that's fine. We want to
45
get it
days.
done as soon as possible.
Yeah, we'll continue this 45 days for, give you more time to work a plan out. And just from what I've heard, I think, I would much rather have an official policy and an amendment to the ordinance or whatever administrative procedure in place than
Yeah.
playing it on an ad hoc basis. You know,
No, yeah,
because
I
that way,
think to do this, we would want to have
Yeah.
the authorization granted within the body of the ordinance.
yeah. Okay, sounds good. 45 days.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
On the Canoga Park Parade,
Pardon me?
the Canoga Park Parade is an event that, you know, been going on in San Fernando Valley for, I don't know, 20 years, and typically 50,000 people line the streets to celebrate those who have died for this country. And we lost that one as a result of this ordinance. Are there other events like that that we are losing throughout the city?
I have heard that some of the event sponsors are not coming to us because of the expense involved. But then we also have a 50% subsidy program to allow event sponsors to submit a letter to you, to your offices, for to get back 50% of the cost of putting that on, city costs, you know, permit costs from BOSS, from DOT, from LAPD, LAFD. And that process is operated through the city clerk's office and my office.
I still think this ordinance is bad public policy. I opposed it for exactly this reason. We're going to lose events that bring communities together, and the most notable one was the one in Canoga Park. They can't afford 50%, and we should have the discretion to recognize that, you know, 50,000 people coming together is a good thing for the city of Los Angeles. So I think this is bad public policy. I've disagreed with it from the beginning, and I'd like to ask that we ask for a report back on events that have been canceled as a result of this policy.
We can work with the city clerk's office and with the Bureau of Street Services to try to give you that information about what has not happened over the course of from October when the ordinance took effect.
Thank you. And do you want the report back before the 45 days or with this report?
No, I know. We'll try to get back to the councilman and the committee in a timely fashion with something.
Well, 45 days would be good.
45 days. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 2, continued from January 6, 2010. Motion, Weezer Perry, relative to the amendment to Municipal Code 41.20, requiring special event permit sponsors to be responsible for public notification of pending events and for the requirement to be administered by the new one-stop special events permit office.
Hi, Paul Smith again from the CLA's office. This is a motion that was introduced by the chair relative to the process by which event sponsors notify the community as to the time, location, and impact of a special event, so that the businesses and other affected entities will know what's happening at a date certain. As we do with the film permits, which is handled by Film LA, there's a notification process by them relative to the impact on the community. Under this ordinance, the notification is to be handled, and Gary can tell me if I'm wrong or not, by the event sponsor themselves. So what we were looking at here is other ways which the community can be notified of a special event in advance of it happening, so they'd be prepared for it. Especially if there's going to be street closures and other sundry things that happen or associated with an event. One of the ideas that was broached into your committee was use Film LA to help with that notification process, and I believe the Bureau of Street Services is looking into that idea, looking at how we could incorporate that, or other ideas which would allow for a better communication from the event sponsor or the event itself to the surrounding community. And Gary Harris is here from BOSS to give you an update of where they are on that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, council members. We do have a program in effect right now where we use the public right-of-way reservation system to make the information available to the public. Now, we know that obviously the majority of the public doesn't use the public right-of-way reservation system, so we're looking at other means to make the information more readily available to those in the community. We have a petition requirement as a part of the special conditions for the permit. We do require that the organizer goes out and does the public flyers and arrow boards and other means to notify the surrounding area an event will be forthcoming. However, as Paul stated, we are looking at other potential ways to make the notification process easier by using a similar system to what Film LA uses, or maybe even the exact same system that is in use for the Film LA process for special events. But that is something that is currently under consideration by our systems folks and our financial management division in our bureau.
Okay, and why don't we just get that report back and see what other ways we can improve on notifications? And this motion actually asks the sponsor of the events to do it, but maybe there's other better ways of doing it, not necessarily the sponsors of the events. For example, there's small organizations that do some events that might be overly burdened, but then again, they're asking for permits to do this, so they may have an obligation. So I'd rather see a report back on what types of, how we can improve the notifications. I think this motion came about because there was an event in downtown where some of the local property owners did not receive proper notification, and it disrupted their business. They said they would have been happy to have the event. With proper notification, they would have been able to adjust delivery of the trucks delivering the goods, et cetera, but since they didn't know about it, it disrupted their service for a day, so their business for a day. So if we could just get a report back on, given all the issues brought to your attention, on how we can improve the notification system. Yeah.
Okay. Would that be 45 days?
45 days. Next item. Is that any questions, comments? Next item.
Item number 3, City Attorney Report and Ordinance amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 66.25 to add administrative penalties for the illegal depositing of non-combustible rubbish.
Okay, and we could take item 3 and 4 together. What's item 4?
Item number 4, Los Angeles Police Commission report relative to illegal dumping.
Okay. So, welcome.
Welcome. Good afternoon. Ted Jordan from the City Attorney's Office, Public Works General Counsel. As to item number 3, we have a draft ordinance that will add sections B and C to section 6625 of the Municipal Code. Those two sections add an administrative penalty for violations of the ordinance for people that are have deposited rubbish in the streets. The administrative penalties are graduated, so the first penalty is, for the first violation, is $500, then it will escalate to $750, and then $1,000 if it's within the same calendar year. After that, they're subject to criminal prosecution as a misdemeanor.
Excellent. And the next ordinance that's being proposed today, number 4?
Item number 4 is a Los Angeles Police Commission report relative to illegal dumping, so that's not something that I...
Oh, that's not, okay. Is that something you would handle? Yeah, okay.
No, actually, that,
I think other boss recommendations in that report.
not in the LAPD report, no.
That would be primarily a note file unless something else was added.
You know, I didn't, when I went through the agenda, I didn't see if there's anything linked to that, so I don't know
Okay.
what might be in the record. I was prepared to talk about the amendments to 6625, not necessarily the police commission report.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Obviously, they're related.
Okay. Any questions, comments? I'm ready to move this forward.
Okay.
We'll move these items forward.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next item.
Item number five, motion Zion Smith relative to directing the chief legislative analyst to report with an explanation of the process used to calculate special event costs and recommendations to clarify the range of services provided by the city to event sponsors and related matters.
Welcome.
Again, Paul Smith from CLA. This is a motion that was, I believe, submitted in 2008 before the actions your committee took and the council took in the fall of 2009 to adopt the current ordinance. I'll quickly run down how the subsidy part of this ordinance works. The council adopted a policy where and took action to provide funding for two separate accounts, subsidy accounts for special events. One is your citywide account that provides for funding for events that affect 3 or more council offices, council districts, actually affect the constituents of 3 or more. So we, on an annual basis, go through and look at, survey the council offices, ask them which ones they want to put on the list. We'll compile that list and bring it back. We have one now, currently for this year. We'll do another one for the subsequent fiscal year. We go to your offices, ask which ones you want to put on the list. We'll compile it, and we'll bring it back to the council for approval. The recently concluded budget process provided funding for next year for both of those things in an aggregate amount of about $2.25 million for both the council office fund and for the citywide fund. Also, it's my understanding that any money that we don't expend relative to both of those funds this year for special events will roll over too. So we'll have adequate funding next year for, I believe, for special events. As you know, this is a new process. This is a new way of dealing with the community and financing or partially financing what was once earlier totally waived in terms of fees by motion. The council, partly because of the economic circumstances which we find ourselves and looking at special events, we're taking up more and more of the agenda space and the costs associated with those, had decided to modify the special events or the provisions and make it a one-stop process through BOSS, through the Bureau of Street Services. So it's a web-based application system where sponsors go in online, put an application in for a special event, and then the subsidy side of it for nonprofits is handled through the city clerk in my office. Block parties are actually funded at 100%. Farmers markets are up to 100%. As you recall, the council just took an action to use some UDAG money to offset the cost of farmers markets. That was about $37,000 on that. These would be markets that are in low-mod areas. So there's some additional funding that's available to farmers markets that are in low-income areas. Just very briefly.
What I think this motion is trying to get at is how much does it actually cost, and what are the different items for which these special events need to pay for? Because I think this is a Zion Smith motion, but I think this came about when there was an event and people said, whoa, wait a minute, how much are we paying for this event? And in my district, I know that some of the events do seem to be, even when we were waiving, aside from when we used to waive them, now when we tell an organization you have to pay for these services for an event, they say, well, wait a minute, this seems way out of line than what we thought they were going to have to pay. So I think what this motion is trying to get at is how can we get to a better transparent, or how can we get more public information out there as to what actual costs associated with putting on an event?
For block parties and for farmers markets, we pretty much know what the cap is on that, because we actually did, the council asked us to work specifically to find out how we could expedite and keep those costs down. And I think for block parties, it's around $500, and for farmers markets, about $3,500, depending on the size and scope of it. For the other ones, when the applicant makes, let's say for a carnival or for some other type of special event, a 5K run, a 10K run, the applicant goes to BOSS, puts what he wants into a on-screen application. It goes to our friends at Bureau of Street Services, and they send this out to each one of the departments that are affected. And it's usually BOSS, DOT for street closures and signs and traffic management, LAFD for tent inspections, public safety, and other things, fireworks. B&S, if it's going to be a stage or other kind of housing that's going to require a building inspector. LAPD is a big cost associated with LAPD. They are right now in the process of preparing their standard plan, their cost plan, that will be coming back to our office within a couple, maybe a month. So you have a series of departments. Generally, it's DOT for the traffic management, for posting of signs and restricted parking. Then it's going to be LAPD for some of them, depending on where they are at and what the LAPD
But the applicants
thinks are the
get this
incident
information, is it itemized?
Yes,
It's itemized for them.
It's
Okay.
itemized by each department, and that department sends their cost estimate back to BOSS. BOSS then relays that information to the applicant, to the sponsor, and then prior to the issuing of the permits, whatever permits are necessary, the sponsor must pay that amount. On the back end, we give them half of that back through the subsidy. So it does require them to pay what those fees are up front, and then wait until they get the subsidy money on the rear end.
Okay. I don't see
Until
no,
they get it in the rear end, is that what you said?
I didn't say that, but you...
I said it.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that a lot of these organizations don't have the capability to front-load the process with money, and so they can't put the money in. But I think this motion is more focused on how these costs are calculated.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing a specific...
Yeah, the calculation basically is overtime, because it's always, most of them are on the weekend or sometime. And so they're not like, but what we really tried to do was strongly suggest to them to use those folks who are on duty at the time of the event, so you don't have to have overtime. But that, in a lot of them, a lot of the departments does not work. They have to assign people to do whatever they're going to do on an overtime basis. So those are costs that, for instance, I believe LAPD is going to come back and modify theirs. Initially they had a system where it was 50-50, 50 on overtime, 50 using the street cops that were assigned patrol for that day. They were also looking at a method of doing it on overtime. I just talked to Lieutenant Garvin today, and he said they're going back and re-examining how they fix those prices, and we're going to come back with a modified plan. So I think over time we need to be cognizant of what those costs are, how we calculate them. The departments are really looking for reimbursement on what the money they put out, especially DOT. They have traffic officers, they have sign folks, they have any number of activities. A big event, they have traffic management guys who are looking at analysis of the traffic demands of that event and doing a plan. So there are a number of expenses that are associated from big events to small events, and of course those costs are going to reflect the magnitude, the intensity of the event. And the ordinance also provides for contracts for larger events. DOT already has entered into contracts with the bigger events that use their services, so they're getting money back from them already. So it's the smaller events, the ones that we deal, the community-based events that we need to be very closely looking at how those costs are calculated, what are they charging and for what, and we're new at this, and we're trying to figure out how to make this system more streamlined, more effective, more efficient. We've had problems in any number of places because it's new and people don't actually know all the rules of the game, and we're trying to fill the gaps and move forward as we go forward. So we'll get better at this.
We'll note and file this motion unless I don't see a need to go to full council. We didn't hear from either of this council officers.
Thank you.
Give directions, so it's note and file this. Any other items?
That's it.
That's it. Anything to say? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.